The Honorable Deputy Premier and Minister for Natural Resources and Labor, Dr. the Honorable Kedrick D. Pickering, Area Veterinarian in Charge, Puerto Rico Veterinary Services, Dr. Fred Saltero, Chief Agricultural Officer, Department of Agriculture, Ministry of Natural Resources, Mr. Bevin Brathwaite, President of the Horse Owners Association, Karen Smith Aaron, President of the BVI Recreation Trust, Mr. Roy Barry, other distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We stand here, or we've gathered here this moment to sign a document that we have worked on literally for months between the USVI, the BVI, Dr. Peter Merrill in Washington, D.C., and it's the local governor's office, the FCO office in the UK. So there's been a lot of work that went into getting us to this point. So we've invited those of you who are in the industry and the media here to witness us signing this agreement. And if I could throw in here, I think we won the first leg, right, of the Triple Crown? Won the first leg of the Triple Crown. Yeah, that's a good thing, I guess. All right. So it basically means then that we have to keep the pressure on our good friends over across the waters. We have been working quite well, the Ministry and the Department of Agriculture, and I think those of you who know Mr. Brathwaite knows that he's very passionate about the subject of agriculture. And when Dr. Pickering joined us, we also realized that he's equally, or maybe sometimes more so, from my point of view, more passionate about the environment as well as the agricultural industry in the BVI. And I will now, without any further ado, I will give you a bit more information as we go on throughout this signing about what has caused us to come to this point. But without any further ado, I will call to the podium Mr. Bevin Brathwaite, and Mr. Brathwaite will give a few remarks from the heart, I'm sure. Mr. Brathwaite.
I recognize the protocol already established and bid you a pleasant good afternoon. The signing of this Memorandum of Understanding is not just a formality, but it signifies the kind of relationship that has been fostered over the decades between the United States Virgin Islands and the British Virgin Islands. This friendly relationship dates back to the 16th and 17th century. Popular surnames like Hodge and Smith, to name a few, speaks to the close bond between both islands. This has extended to the pattern of trade between the islands, and further with the annual Friendship Day celebration, which is hosted alternatively by each territory. This Memorandum of Understanding is specific to equine, that is horses, donkeys, mules, and zebras. To date, we have only been able to take advantage of a minute aspect of the sporting activities that can be exploited in the area of equestrian sports, and thus taking full advantage of our relationship. We at the Department of Agriculture, as well as the horse owners, are stewards of this memorandum, and as such, we do not view this document lightly, but will guard against every possible potential infraction to ensure that this relationship matures to involve pre-arranged movements of other species in the near future. We view this signing as an important step that, by extension, makes the BVI part of the United States of America. This depicts the level of trust and confidence that is placed in the signatories of both territories and it can be considered a coveted privilege for the British Virgin Islands to make this another milestone. It would be remiss of me not to recognize and thank the team of officials working on both sides to make this day possible. Special thanks to Dr. Soltero and his team from the United States Department of Agriculture, as well as Dr. Bradford and her team for being the main conduit of information transfer between both Virgin Islands. Thanks to my chief vet, Dr. Montrose, and his team from the British Virgin Islands Department of Agriculture for providing the necessary information and documents necessary to make this outcome possible. In closing, I would like to wish for continued cooperation between these territories for generations to come, and that the signing of this Memorandum of Understanding marks the dawning of a new era in the racing industry, which will be the catalyst for new economic viability to the Virgin Islands. I thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brathwaite, for those remarks. I will now call to the podium our Deputy Premier and the Minister for Natural Resources and Labor, Dr. Kedrick Pickering. And as he prepares to come to the podium, just to reiterate my comment from earlier, I think Dr. Pickering means well. We've always been, I always say this because I really believe it, we've always been, in my opinion, lucky in the Ministry of Natural Resources and Labor, or maybe God is smiling on us quite seriously, to have somebody at the helm who believes in the subject. And I now ask Dr. Pickering to give his remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pleasant good afternoon to each and every one of you. And let me first begin by welcoming everyone here this afternoon. And a special welcome to our friends from the U.S. Department of Agriculture and Plant Health Inspection Services, Dr. Soltero. Thank you so much for joining us here today. It's been a long journey. I really appreciate you taking the time out to be here. We know that you're on a short span this afternoon. And so this afternoon, we will create history in these greater Virgin Islands when we sign the Memorandum of Understanding to formalize our commitment to the development of horse racing and to allow for effective movement of horses between our territories. Horse racing has become one of the distinguishing features of our territory's culture, and it remains a central element of our identity. This sport has always brought generations of family and friends together for competition, enjoyment, and camaraderie. Yesterday is an example of our close-knit relationship. For yesterday, we hosted the first leg of the Triple Crown Challenge at the Ellis Thomas Downs. This challenge is a collaborative effort between the BVI Horse Owners Association and the Horse Owners Association of St. Croix and St. Thomas to keep this vibrant sport alive. No doubt, as we continue to appreciate the long-standing friendship with our sister territory, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and will continue to seek opportunities that will enable us to forge stronger relationships. In a few minutes, we will sign the Memorandum of Understanding between the United States Department of Agriculture Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, referred to as APHIS, and the Department of Agriculture and the Ministry of Natural Resources and Labor, in an effort to pool our resources and to continue to work together to achieve safe and secure exchanges in these Virgin Islands. The Memorandum of Understanding sets forth procedures of reciprocal cooperation for the territory in the movement of horses between the territories involved for the purpose of racing. It will assist each territory in meeting its responsibilities for the appropriate health standards. We share a common concern for the health status of horses used for racing. It will assist each territory in meeting its responsibilities. As a result, we are ensuring compliance with the appropriate animal health requirements. The MOU will help to avoid duplication of efforts on the territory's part for protecting the horse population. And I think that has very practical implications for both sides of the divide. So by signing the MOU, we are also agreeing to share information with authorized personnel that relates to the movement of horses between the USVI and the BVI, including all animal disease records. And I'm sure each and every one of you involved in the sport will have a strong appreciation for what that really means. So not only including disease records, but respective registries, inventories, and listings of horse racing organizations that fall under their purview. We are agreeing to share evidence of serious non-compliance of standards of policies. We are agreeing to the practical extent possible to consult and coordinate with each other on regulatory or policy proposals and the significant policy interpretations involving animal health issues, including the movement of horses between the respective territories. I'm sure most of you will agree and understand that there is a very powerful lobby called the Animal Rights Lobby. And so we have to be sure that we don't end up on the negative side of those who protect animals. We are agreeing that horses entering the USVI from the BVI will be monitored by APHIS veterinary medical officer or a United States Virgin Islands Department of Agriculture's veterinarian or other personnel designated by those agencies. And similarly, those entering the BVI from the USVI will be monitored by the Department of Agricultural veterinary medical officer or other personnel designated by that agency. Today's signing is a mere formality to what has existed for generations. For many years, we in the British Virgin Islands have been working together with U.S. Virgin Islands in our various government agencies such as police, customs, and financial services, to name a few. Historically, as territories, we have enjoyed a good trading relationship that dates back to the days of the Dutch and Danish West Indies. After emancipation, our joint survival dictated our relationship was more than economic base to one of a shared partnership. And so this bond is recognized year after year with the establishment of our annual Friendship Day celebrations. And I could pause it just to say that as I speak, a team from our House of Assembly, including the Premier, is actually in the United States Virgin Islands, attending the swearing in of the new legislature over there as we speak. So it speaks volumes to the bond of friendship that we share between these territories. And this is just one more manifestation of how valuable that bond is and how much it means to us. Because this has always been the fundamental truth of our dynamic relationship, and this reality remains so today. And so my congratulations to the hard-working people here at the Department of Agriculture and the Ministry of Natural Resources and Labor who made this happen, along with the members of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I also pause here to say that, what is amazing is how difficult these things can be at times. We've had this document back and forth for months. And whether you believe it or not, it has to go to London, it has to go to Washington. And the technocrats involved will fight over one word, whether it is will or shall, whether it is understanding or agreement. And that has had us back and forth for nearly 6 months now, just trying to get the document finalized. So what you see here today is a testament to our commitment to hard work, to ensuring that our relationship continues to grow from strength to strength. It was the American business mogul Henry Ford who once said, and I quote, "Coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress. working together is success, unquote. And being here today is a perfect example of what working together can mean and how success can be manifested. And so today marks another chapter in the success story that is the collaborative efforts of the Greater Virgin Islands. And so, ladies and gentlemen, it is promising to the legacy of horse racing that the government of the Virgin Islands and the government of the United States Virgin Islands understand the significance of the sports and remains committed to strengthening it for our enjoyment and for generations to come. It would be remiss of me if I didn't acknowledge all the members that are involved directly with the sport, and especially my high school classmate who is now president of the association. I thank you. May God bless you. May God continue to bless these Virgin Islands. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Deputy Premier. And we shall now proceed with the signing of the document, after which we'll have some remarks by Dr. Soltero. All right, thank you. And now we'll invite Dr. Soltero to the podium to give a few remarks. And he enthusiastically told me that he was in the BVI 10 times already. So on the 11th time, he probably walk out an honorary citizenship or something for Dr. Soltero.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of the Administrator of the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, APHIS, of the United States Department of Agriculture, Mr. Kevin Shea, and of the Chief Veterinary Officer of the Department, Dr. John Clifford, I share their feeling of satisfaction and accomplishment with the completion of the negotiations that today we finish with the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding between USDA and the British Virgin Islands to regulate the movement of equines for racing events. I truly understand Dr. Pickering's words. This has been a very long process. We have worked on our end, and you have worked on your end for many, many months. And like he said, all these documents require an extensive proofreading, verification. Changing of one little word will cause the whole agreement to start all over again. I do have to thank all the persons involved in this from the BVI and from the USVI. On our side, since we started this this project, we gave all our efforts, but it was very hard to accomplish. And now that we are finally at the end of the road, we will start very new possibilities, and we will talk about them. This is really something that makes us very proud, and it is the start of a very meaningful relationship. As the area veterinarian in charge for Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, I am honored to be part of this important event between both agencies, and I am confident that this agreement will benefit all parties involved and will improve the quality of our relations and of all the people of both territories. I thank the Minister of Natural Resources and Labor of the British Virgin Islands, the Honorable Dr. Kedrick Pickering, for inviting me to this ceremony and for the hospitality given to us. I look forward for the next 5 years of a great working relationship between our agencies. And I know that by facilitating the implementation of this MOU, we will be agreeing to designate a liaison officer to serve on standing committees that we will meet as necessary, no less than once a year. So whenever this 5-year agreement is nearing the termination, that we don't have to go through all this process again, this standing committee will be there to facilitate the renewal of the memorandum and to change it as needed. Matters for this consideration of the standing committee include to review each agency's participation in the MOU, assessment of the MOU's effectiveness, and any necessary modification. As appropriate, the committee will address urgent issues and specific cases of non-compliance. The members of this standing committee are myself as the area veterinarian in charge for Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands. I will be representing the part of USDA APHIS. For the VBI, for the U.S. Virgin Islands Department of Agriculture, the member would be Dr. Bethany Bradford, and she's the Director of Veterinary Services in St. Croix. And for the BBI Department of Agriculture will be Dr. Michael Montrose, which is the Chief Veterinary Officer for the Department of Agriculture here at the BBI. So with this committee, we will be streamlining the process. We will have the tools necessary to adjust and evolve. We can accommodate the needs that will be developing during the MOU. And it will make the agreement a very dynamic agreement. It will not only be a paper formality, it can change, it can evolve. So this standing committee is very important, and I believe our relations are already there now that we have finalized this long process, and I think too long. It took too long to do it. We've learned a lot from it. And it's from now on, it's just a matter of developing it. And one of the good things that already we will be taking place is in APHIS, we have started a new traceability agreement with all the states. And now we are going to be including the BBI, which involves the tracking and the identification of all the animals being involved in movements. And this will improve our way of doing business and knowing what animals are being moved, the owner, the premise ID. It standardizes the whole process. So by signing this agreement, BBI becomes a part of that whole nationwide effort that's being done right now in USDA. So we are right in the middle of the action. So it is another good thing that happens today. And so we are ready to start, and I hope we don't have to go through this in the next 5 years. I do agree, I do appreciate, and I know there's some questions that you wanted to do. I don't know if you want them to do them now. I'm open for any kind of questions from the group. Yes?
Okay, as Dr. Saltero said, we both he and Dr. Pickering open to questions from the media.
Yeah, you said 5 years.
The agreement is for 5 years.
It's for 5 years, okay, great. The other thing that was discussed is that health records will have to be shown for the horses when moving in between the islands.
That is correct.
What other requirements or anything else? I know you talked a bit about the traceability. How will the animals be traced? Are they microchipped, or do they have identification codes or anything?
One of the clauses of the agreement is there's got to be a permanent ID. Tattoos are still allowed, but microchipping is the method of choice. But we will not be enforcing the microchipping right now. That is a process that even the US DA hasn't completely enforced in all the states. But a permanent identification of the animals has to be present. Tattooing is still a viable method if the tattoo marks are readable. In the past, IDs by picture or description was allowed, but there are many problems because it can be, records cannot be tracked as well. So microchipping would be the best method, but tattooing, there's a lot of horses that still have viable tattoos. But microchipping will be the preferred method, and I'm glad the BVI and the USVI is the leaders, because most of the states have not put that in writing yet. There's some states that will allow just tattooing, and in the MOU, we have placed the microchipping as one of the options, which is really some event that needs to be acknowledged. You are in the forefront of traceability, and this will be the future. All animals will be required to have microchipping in a few years. But that's a process that we are undertaking right now.
The MOU also talks about equine. It's pretty general, but it says for racing purposes. If someone wants to bring a zebra in here and race it, is it going to be allowed? Donkey races. I mean, are we going to be able to all sorts of equines?
Well, I think that one of the things Dr. Salter alluded to is that the agreement is forward-thinking. So it, although nothing that I'm aware of says that it's on the agenda, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road, whatever the possibilities are. I think the point he's making about microchipping speaks to the forward-thinking nature of the MOU, so that it doesn't limit what may or may not occur in the future.
Just to add, yes, this MOU was developed for racing purposes, racing events, and it does involve only equine at this moment. It doesn't mean that now other kind of agreements can be worked out for other types of events or other species. This is the door that we are crossing for the time being, and like the MOU says, racing events only. Horses will be required to leave the territory after the 7 days of the event. That is in the MOU because we don't want to get involved in breeding purposes. We don't want to complicate it, and we know how difficult it was with just one agenda. If we would have opened up the possibilities, we would still be in the table negotiating this. So this is the beginning. And it is only for racing, it's only for equines. If you start developing a zebra event on racing, who knows? It is allowed because it says equine for racing, but the intent is to continue with the racing association with what you have already here. But the future can be, it's still in the phase.
And why was there this such a need? Was there a problem before of transporting the animals back and forth between the two territories?
Why? What was a need?
To sign the MOU.
There was an MOU in place before. It expired early last year, and this was just the renewal.
Okay.
And the renewal process looked at improving the past experiences. So it's just an extension of an agreement with a more forward-thinking approach to it.
And also, this agreement between BVI and USDA is unique because if USDA would follow the normal procedures for international movements from other islands, it would be very difficult to meet because of the testing, the blood samples, the time in the quarantine facilities. It would be very difficult for the racing association and the racing events to be able to continue as they were. So this MOU facilitates those events, knowing our relationship. If it was very hard to convince the National Center for Import and Export to understand that Puerto Rico, BVI, and USVI share the same high risk and the same diseases and the same ticks and the same conditions that the horses here share. So by convincing them that the disease status of the territories is the same, then we can proceed with movements. If we had any kind of event in Tortola, in Virgin Gorda, that somehow foreign disease came in, this would completely alter the situation and a new agreement would have to be developed because right now the conditions are just right so for us to share movement. And that's why an MOU is very important because if not, we have to go back and treat BVI as they would be moving from any kind of other nation, international movement, which are very difficult. That's a great question.
If someone wants to view the MOU, where can they view it at? Full copy?
As soon as we have it signed by Mr. Shea, which is going to be done this week, I will get that fax. You will have the copies, but I can leave a copy here just for you guys to have it.
Let's get it.
Until it's signed, it'll be signed. Right?
Yeah.
There's only one more signature and it will be done. Yeah. We just needed to speed the process up. And yes, I'm sure this is a public document. You'll be able to have it.
We're still waiting for one more signature from Kevin Shea in Washington. So when that is completed, but the document isn't.
We decided to do it this way, or it would have to wait another few months. He'll get it signed this week.
Ron Henry from Virgin Islands News Online. Dr. Pickering, you said you're framing this to more or less look at forward thinking. Would it have been more useful to enforce the traceability with the microchip insertion instead of making it an option?
That's for the experts. I'm not an expert, and I wouldn't know which is which. I think the options are there, and it's only a matter of time. Maybe in the future, the next MOU might stipulate that the microchip is the only method, but I think there's obviously a transition.
Yes.
I think what Dr. Saltero pointed out is that even within the states themselves, some of the states don't have an agreement of this nature. Mm-hmm. So we're really a step ahead.
Sean Rose, JTV News. Could you reassure us that the Ministry of Agriculture is sufficiently equipped to manage the traceability aspects of this MOU going forward, not only in relation to the microchip becoming a part of that, but any other aspect in relation to disease control and so forth?
Well, I think the mere fact that we're signing the agreement speaks volumes because, don't take these things lightly. What Dr. Saltero just pointed out is that this is unique in its own right. The United States doesn't sign agreements. I think sometimes, let me back up a little, sometimes we take our relationship with the United States Virgin Islands for granted because of the easy access by which we move, but we still have to remember that there are two sovereign states. So, this is British, that is U.S.
That is correct.
Every word in this document is vetted in London by the FCO. Every word is vetted in Washington by the experts. So it's not something that is local and it's overlooked. So we have to make sure that our standards are in place, but they also ensure that we have the capacity to maintain those standards. And so this agreement it's not as simple as it seems. It speaks volumes to not only the amount of work, but as I said in my remarks, the relationship that these islands share going way back.
And that's another reason of the standing committee. I'm sure the standing committee will be watching that everything, especially the compliance part, is being met. We totally base this on trust, and the committees are the responsible for following it up. And I'm sure there's not going to be a problem in
Absolutely,
compliance.
we'll do our best to make sure that.
And the information will be shared. I mean, we will be transmitting all the documents that we have in a new software that you will have copies also. So this is part of the process. Any information that you require will be shared by all three agencies. So this is something that we have to value, and we do, at least in our part, very much.
Dr. Pickering, could this be considered a part of your ongoing strategy to improve agricultural development on the island, especially in relation to animal management, such as the black belly sheep initiative you spoke of recently?
Well, that's a different issue, but I think the MOU is twofold, because I think it's important to point out that the Ministry of Natural Resources and Labor is not the ministry responsible for the sport of horse racing. We're responsible for the animal health. And the issue with respect to the advancement of agriculture, as the PS pointed out, is something that we're working diligently on, and in time you'll be au fait with what we're doing.
You know, just to, while we wait for maybe one more question, just to echo some of the comments coming from the table. Look, a lot of work went into this document, a lot of work. And in our midst, we have Dr. Montrose and Mr. Clark, whom I consider to be his good sidekick. These guys work diligently. So there is no issue here in terms of making this work. I mean, it has to work. It just has to work, because we put a lot of work into it. You know, it would be a waste of time to have done that and for naught, really. Okay, we'll entertain one more question.
Oh.
Anything here? No? Okay, all right. Well, let me at this time thank you for being here. Thank you, Minister Pickering, our Deputy Premier, for being here and for being a part of this, and also for being a part of the back and forth. And as you mentioned earlier, every word sort of meant something. It kind of, to us lay folk, one word might mean something. To the legal people, it means like a million things. So they have to do what they have to do. I thank you to Dr. Soltero for coming over and being a part of this ceremony. I also want to say thank you to Dr. Peter Merrill. He isn't here, but he's been kind of like the go-between us and like a whole other world somewhere in DC that had something to do with this document. But
There was a lot of frustration in our part too.
Exactly.
I understand that.
But he's here today. Thank you to Mr. Brathwaite, and as I mentioned earlier, I think Mr. Brathwaite and his team, part of his team here with him, very much involved in the development of agriculture and very passionate about moving it forward. And thank you to our good friend from St. Thomas. We forgot you earlier, Mr. Prentice, works with the Department of Agriculture in the USVI. Thank you for being here. As a matter of fact, while Dr. Montrose was at the dock looking for him, he was in Mrs. King's office sitting down. I kind of thought he was one of the regular. He was there already. Thank you to Mrs. King and
Yes.
and Dr. Soltier. What's the name of your secretary?
Sandra
Sandra.
Escobar. Really,
Yeah.
their work was
Yeah. These are the people
It
who
was
kind of like
very
did
instrumental.
a lot of the legwork in terms of the emailing and getting stuff moved around and
Oh, yes.
all of that, and for organizing the meeting here today. Thank you to the media. You guys could have been elsewhere, but I know you like us a lot, so you prefer to come and be with us. Thank you to the horse owners, Association, Mrs. Aaron, Mr. Smith, Mr. Barry. I'm being signaled that I'm forgetting Mr. Fenty, our GIS officer, along with the rest of the GIS team here in government, and Mrs. Bajan over in the back, the minister's private secretary. All of these are the people who did a lot of the work behind the scenes. So I thank you all for coming, and we will now bring this signing ceremony to a close. Thank you very much.